Welcome to another Jew and Gentile podcast. I am your host, Chris Katulka, and with me is none other than the Jewish sage himself, the one, the only, Mr. Steve Herzig. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Chris. How are you? No issues.
Wow, that fast.
That's right, no issues. I had a 12-and-a-half-hour drive. All my anxieties went off just as I drove the miles, all the stuff just drifted away.
That's right. You and Alice drove down to Alabama, the great state of Alabama.
We drove down to Alabama, had a great missions conference there. They got stickers.
Oh, hold on.
How do people get stickers?
Well, hang on a second. They didn't just get stickers. If you're listening to the podcast and you're in Alabama, you've got stickers coming your way.
With a capital S.
Hundreds and hundreds of stickers are coming your way. Steve was promoting it, and all of a sudden my phone buzzing. I have to get back to 26 people to let them know stickers are coming your way. So you did a good job, Steve. Great job selling those stickers.
We love stickers, and the story of that young man, if you ever see him at Word of Life, tell him that he's responsible for nearly 10,000 stickers.
I will do that. Is that what it is? We're up to 10,000?
Well, we're pretty close. Before Alabama,
do we need to order more stickers?
We might have to order more stickers.
Good to know. All right. So to get your stickers, you just got to go to 424-1948. You got to give us your name and your address, and
yes,
that way.
I told the people in Alabama, don't just say I want stickers. You have to give us your name and your email address. And your regular address.
Yeah, we don't need your email address.
We want their email address.
Okay, that's fine, because you're not getting stickers through the email.
We're not emailing them, but we'd like your email, but we need your mailing address so that Alice could put it all together.
100%. So, again, you can text us at 424-1948. Now, we got a special guest today we're going to bring on in one moment. I just want to remind you that the Jew and Gentile podcast is sponsored by FOI Equip. Steve has his last class tomorrow night for My 7 Chapters.
All right, what's going to happen tomorrow, Chris? I gave an assignment. I got nothing.
Oh, no, people are already...
I've got bupkis. I'm going to call on people and hear their 7 chapters.
What do you mean you got bupkis?
Well, I gave my lesson last week, and everything depends on the people coming in. If no one does it, I'll say, have a nice day.
Well, I did notice that some people on YouTube were giving their 7 chapters. At least 2 people have written their 7 chapters down who watched your video on YouTube. So
okay.
We can at least target those people.
I'll target them.
Okay, so you can go to foiequip.org to register for Steve's My 7 Chapters or his last class, Thursday, November. What's today? The 15th? No. Today is the 13th. So the 14th, excuse me, November 14th. And then next month, Steve and I will be team teaching a class on Hanukkah.
Do you know when Hanukkah comes this year?
It's pretty early, isn't it?
No, it's Christmas.
Oh, it's on Christmas?
It's on Christmas.
Oh, I'm not even
Hanukkah
close.
will be going to first-run movies and eating Chinese food. That's what everybody does who's Jewish.
All right, well, listen, we have our good friend, Pastor Neil, who is on the line. Hello, Pastor Neil. Great to see you, brother.
Good morning, Chris. It's great to be here with you guys.
Okay, last time we were with Pastor Neil, we were actually in Dallas, Texas. He was so kind to host Steve and I to come down.
Notice we haven't gotten another invitation.
I know, I'm going down for Passover.
You haven't gotten one.
Of course. I get bupkis and Chris gets to go.
Steve, I told you Chris doesn't tell you anything.
He tells me bupkis.
I tell you guys everything right on the show. I don't know why everyone's so upset. I tell you on the show.
Look, we were at his church, and what happens? I bomb, and you get to go back. That's life in the city. That's no problem. I'm an old guy.
Everybody knows exactly what you believe. Jewish people invented everything. That was your line of the night when we were at Northwest. I remember it. Hey, we invented that too. We invented that too.
Named the thing. We invented it.
You went from sin.
We did it.
All the way over to salvation.
Well, we didn't invent sin. We perfected it.
You were on a roll that for everything from cell phones to medication to sin to salvation. Jewish people have done it all. I loved it that night.
They have done it all.
Well, we have Pastor Neil on today because we're going to be starting a 3-part series on I feel like we're going to church, Pastor Neil, because you have been teaching a series in your church, Northwest Bible Church in Dallas, Texas, through the judges. And so we're going to get a glance of that over the next 3 weeks. And so it'll be good. And if people want to dive in more to Neil's teaching on the judges, they can just go to Northwest Bible Church's website, which is what, Neil? Do you know that off the top of your head?
NorthwestBible.org.
NorthwestBible.org. You will see more in-depth teaching from Neil, but he's going to give us an overview, and he even was kind enough to give us a graphic that he has that's an overview of judges that is in our show notes.
Our show notes!
Everybody.
How do you get to show notes?
You just got to go to the bottoms and hit select more or move things up, and bada bing, bada boom, there are the show notes. And
in other words, what they just look at first is not the whole package. They've got to scroll a little.
You got to scroll a little bit, but when you keep scrolling down, right before you get to the news, you're going to see Pastor Neil's graphic that you can go to for an overview of Judges. But before we get to Judges, I've got a great panel of people here. I got Steve, our Jewish sage. We've got Pastor Neil. Trump was elected not last Tuesday. Was it last November 5th? He was elected by the American people, and he's been busy bringing in a new administration. And one of the big ones, one of the surprising ones, Steve, is, of course, Israel is coming up. The ambassador to Israel is a major focus. Number one, I want to pull back for a moment. He's going to make a lot of choices for ambassadors to countries all around the world. Some countries we're going to know very well: Germany, France, European countries, South American countries, China. But think about it. The number one thing that is really important on the minds of people right now is who's going to be the ambassador of the tiny little state of Israel. It's making international news right now that Mike Huckabee, former governor of Arkansas, is going to be the new ambassador to Israel. And I want to throw it open to our panel here, Pastor Neil and to Steve, as we think about, is this an interesting pick to you? Were you surprised to hear that this was the one?
I wasn't surprised. I was happy. Number one, he's a believer.
Yep.
It's going to be an interesting thing to watch. He's a lover of Israel. He's been there many, many times. He's led trips. He's been invited to come. He has, in fact, the current ambassador to the UN, Dion, just had him within just a few weeks ago, and said, I'm looking very much. I'm looking forward to having Mike Huckabee. He thought it was a great selection. Hey, if Israel's happy with the United States' action, that's been unusual in the last 4 years. So I'm pretty happy about that.
How about you, Neil? When you hear, I don't know if you've heard about it or not, but Governor Huckabee, now ambassador to Israel, what goes through your mind when you hear that?
Instead of commenting for me, Chris, I'll comment for all of Israel. No, just kidding. But seriously, as you guys have been in Israel, and I've heard y'all say many times that many people in Israel, many Jews, not all, but many, realize that believers in Jesus often are their best supporters in the United States. And so I think for Israel, knowing he is a believer, knowing he is a lover of Israel, because of what we understand in the Word and things we'll talk about today, I think for Israel, it just sounds like a ray of hope for them in their relationships with the United States.
When I think about it, and I like the way you put that too, Pastor Neil, it's a ray of hope. And as Steve was saying, they were celebrating. The interesting thing to me is that oftentimes when somebody is moved into an ambassadorship of some sort, especially in Israel, it's always been that traditionally it's been a Jewish man. Or a Jewish, I don't know if there's been a woman or not, but it's somebody with a Jewish background. I know Friedman was the last one, and I forget who it was under the Obama administration. I have his face in my an image in my mind of his face. I couldn't remember who it is, but I know a Jewish man. That seems pretty common that they would put a Jewish person as the ambassador. It's surprising. It's an evangelical Christian now. It makes you wonder what, I'm sure Netanyahu knows how to manage, because I know he loves evangelical Christians. It's interesting, though, because Netanyahu partners with a group of, we talked about this last week with Adi and Gull from Israel. You know, a lot in his coalition are not the greatest fans of evangelical Christians, the more right-leaning, ultra-Orthodox.
They will now.
You think so? That's what I'm asking.
I think they're going to be forced to if they want to be part of the government. I think it's a way of Donald Trump. I don't know if it's by accident or if it's strategic. You want to give him credit or whatever. Having an evangelical Christian who is going to the state of Israel, being there on a regular basis, if not living there for the duration, is going to put him smack in the room with all these folks. And I think he certainly has the experience. Let's look at it this way, Chris. It's an opportunity for a representative of Jesus Christ in a political environment to be Jesus to them.
Yeah.
And it's a tremendous responsibility. I think we should be praying for him, but it's a tremendous opportunity for advancing the cause of not just America, but for Christ. And you pray he's not in their face. Let's pray he'll do it in a proper way.
Which I'm sure he will.
I think he will, in a respectful way. The Lord is going to give him opportunities. Look, we at Friends of Israel, in just everyday life, when we take trips to Israel, we have natural opportunities to simply share our heart for Israel. We're asked all the time. Just think of the number of times he's going to be asked. Personally, tell me your story, Mike. I want to hear your story. So we ought to pray for him. I think there's great opportunity there.
There's also another pick that was made for the UN ambassador as well, Elise Stefanik, who is another supporter of Israel, like I think her predecessor, Nikki Haley, in the previous Trump administration.
Very much for Israel.
And you can actually watch her on YouTube, where she is incredibly direct with those presidents of those universities that were not treating anti-Semitism properly and speaking out against it, and kind of really put them to the fire when it comes to how they were treating the Jewish people. So I'm anxious to see how she is able to speak to to support Israel in a very anti-Israel environment, which is the United Nations.
I agree, Pastor. What are you thinking in Dallas? What are the folks in Dallas thinking about just in general the election and the appointment so far? Have you heard anything?
A lot of times people don't understand how diverse Dallas is in terms of political parties. And a lot of times people think it's all, I'll say, conservative Republicans, and it's actually split.
Mm-hmm.
So I was in Cuba last week during the election, and my elders asked me, be back this Sunday to talk to our body, because people were worried how people were going to be feeling. And we actually had a beautiful time. We used our whole service to pray. But I was surprised that when I came in, there actually wasn't a lot of overall tension in our church, because the election the results were so clear. Mm-hmm. Now, I was talking with somebody, and, people who were for Harris, a lot of those people are, like everywhere else, I can't believe this has happened. I don't know what I'm going to do. But I've been surprised in our own church. I think we've talked a lot, especially because of the book of Judges, about something I'll get into later. And I think it's actually really helped us, whether we want it Trump or Harris. I feel like our people are in a good place looking toward Jesus.
Let's move into Judges, Neil. I want to start with this. I'm always fascinated. I'm not a pastor, and so preparing yourself for every week to prepare a message for the hearts of the sheep, the flock that you shepherd. what made you think to yourself, we need to go to Judges? Is this just something that you? I'm always interested in this because you and I know Northwest plans out very much this process of making sure everything is working in great detail. But at the same time, it starts with you and your heart, and I want to kind of start there. Why Judges?
Okay, let me tell you why not, Chris. People said, are you doing Judges because of this election coming up and what you think about our officials? And I said, no. In fact, the title of my series on Judges was God's Leaders, God's People, because this is written for the people of God. And so our first application is to the people of God. So I want to be careful not to cross that line too quick of I'm making some comment on political leaders. So my answer is going to kind of disappoint you, I think, Chris. You know what? I am just trying to take us through the Bible constantly. And I look and say, where haven't we been lately?
That doesn't disappoint at all. That's so important.
And it keeps me from just talking about the same two things that I want to talk about. It frees me when people say, why don't you talk about this? Why aren't you dealing with this issue? Hey, we're just going through the Bible here, pointing people to Jesus. Mm-hmm. So we hadn't been in Judges in a while, and I wanted to make life hard on myself. So we did Judges.
I like it. All right, so you surprised us before we came on. We were talking, and you said you've got an introduction, but you weren't going to tell us. So I'm going to leave it up to you. I'm going to say take it away, Pastor Neil, for Judges.
Okay, to you and Steve. And to all our listeners, I want to start by saying this. Yevareheha Adonai ve'yishmereha. Which means what, Steve?
I have no idea.
Oh, my gosh. The Jewish say, I'm worried that my pronunciation was really poor.
I've heard it before, but I couldn't translate it for you.
Lord something.
The Lord bless you and
that's
keep
right.
you.
Yep.
It's the high priestly prayer,
it's from Numbers.
Aaronic prayer, Numbers chapter 6. And I want to say, the reason I say that is because we know that's what God wanted for his people and wants for his people, to be blessed. And so the book of Judges is all about God's big desire to bless his people through giving them a land. And, Joshua ends, right? And the nation of Israel is on a roll. I mean, they think they're going to win the national championship in college football, right? And people are excited. And Joshua says, okay, choose this day whom you're going to serve. And everybody says, I'm all in. I'm all in. And that's how you get to the book of Judges and God's call for them for a long obedience in the same direction.
So obedience is what this is going to be. To me, Judges, Neil, when you go through Judges, it's a spiritual roller coaster ride that the Israelites are on. We're no longer just simply talking about going through the Torah and kind of seeing the ups and downs. Now we're on a fast track up and down roller coaster ride of Israel's relationship with God, because God's going to remain covenantal to Israel. God's going to have a relationship with Israel no matter what the roller coaster ride looks like. But it doesn't mean that there aren't consequences to Israel's disobedience to God at all. So Talk to us about that and kind of leading up to the book of Judges and as we enter into Judges chapter 1. But today specifically, we'll be looking at one particular judge in chapter 3.
Yes. Chris, those consequences and even how far people went off the tracks of the roller coaster, the stories are brutal. And some people ask me, Neil, you're really going to go through Judges? What are you going to do? Because you've got some of the worst stories in the Bible.
Yeah.
And so, Chris, just knowing that people are aware of some of these worst stories in the Bible, I think it would be good just to give an overview. I'm going to give a 3-minute overview of the whole book of Judges, okay?
Go for it.
On the show notes that Steve has helped us understand where they are, we have a diagram that really is the overview of the book of Judges. And here we go. Judges starts with this kind of, I'll say, 2-part introduction. You're introduced to Israel's enemies from external enemies, the land they got to conquer. those people to their internal enemies, which ends up being themselves, because they forget God, they disobey God, they break the covenant. And so when they get in trouble, they cry out to God, right? And you're introduced to these judges. There's 12 major judges. There's 12 judges in all, 7 major ones that get highlighted. The first few are kind of okay. You get to the middle of the book, and it says, Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord. And from there, there's a transition, and they start fighting each other. And the next 3 judges are awful. And I'm going to do the last one this week, but they're terrible. And then the book ends, and you get 2 Levites, religious leaders. And you think, surely the religious leaders will do better. They do not do better.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the book, the very last verse says, there was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in their own eyes. And really, Judges, in its kind of narrative style, leaves you with a question. Will Israel ultimately choose God as their king? Or are they going to want something else? And they don't do a good job of answering that question. And really, the question comes back to us. And it's fascinating in an election season. Will we keep saying God is the ultimate king we need? And Chris, that's what I alluded to earlier, that almost every week during this election season, hey, let me just remind us, because Israel needed to wrestle with this. Is Jesus the king we are ultimately going to look to?
Mm-hmm.
So there's my big, quick overview.
And this is something that Stephen and I had mentioned leading up to the election as well. Is this concept that no matter, because we didn't know what the outcome would be, it could have gone one way or the other, but either way, we had to remind ourselves that Jesus, like you're saying, Neil, Jesus is king, and Judges was dealing with the same issue. It's interesting too that the issue of a king will become Israel's big question for a long time. It's not just in Judges. You know, when you move from Judges into Ruth, and you move into 1st and 2nd Samuel, you know, I remember even reading for the first time about when you get into 1 Samuel, I believe in chapter 6 or 7, you know, they're wrestling with the concept of God is saying, do you really want a human king? Do you know what this king, I love it. God sounds like he's in a political commercial. He goes, you want these guys? They're going to tax you. They're going to use you in your army. You're going to, you could just follow me unless you're saying, Neil, I am your king. And so I don't want to take away from Judges, but I'm saying the kingship, you don't ever think about kingship in Judges, but really it's driving Israel. Israel wants a king. They want a leader. And at the same time, they're not looking to the one who promised to lead them with his compassion and mercy and grace. And so anyway, I think it's great for us then to think about, with your overview, you and I had talked about one of the judges that you wanted to look at, which is Othniel today.
Yeah.
Hey, just to remind you,
yes,
Jewish people invented how not to respond after a great victory.
Go ahead.
I'm telling you, the Joshua's, he let him in. Everything's great. We're going to serve the Lord. We've got the land. And what do the Jewish people do? They've arrived. What do? Well, Pastor Neil's going to tell us. Hey, there are people right now thinking that Trump is the Messiah. Life's going to be great.
Yeah.
Everything's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, sin is still a problem.
100%.
It hasn't changed. Last Tuesday to Wednesday, things are still the same. We have a different leader. Some people are happy. Some people are sad. Sei gesund. But you still have to get up. You have to go to work. You have to lead your family. You have every situation you had before you have. Now, the politicians can make your life more miserable, or they can make it a little easier, but they cannot solve the sin problem.
Yeah.
They cannot solve the problem of relationship between you and God. And as we go through Judges, as we're going to hear Pastor tell us about Judges, we're going to see how we, the Jewish people, said life's good, every man for himself. and forget God. He did his thing. Now we're going to do our thing.
Can I ask one foundational question? I don't care if it's Neil that answers it or you, Steve. What is a judge? Why do they call them judges? You know, is Othniel sitting in his bench with his gavel? Why do they call them a judge?
Pastor Neil, you've been teaching it. Tell us.
Yeah. And, you know, it's interesting because it doesn't look like someone who is simply sitting at a bench with a gavel, sitting there judging everybody, the laws, and are people obeying or disobeying. But it seems like God, it says, God raises up these people. Sometimes it says he is with them. And most of what is highlighted that they do is they go lead Israel into battle when Israel's gotten into trouble because they've sinned. They call to God. God raises the judge and saves them. So it's God's instrument for getting them out of their current mess. Now, let me tell you, when you get to the later judges, like Samson and Jephthah, they just create more mess.
Yeah.
And it's really good what Steve said about, is our hope in Trump or is our hope in Jesus?
Yeah. And I think it's good, too, that what you're mentioning is that the judge was chosen to judge Israel and to bring them back into alignment with the law of God. And so I think that's, you know, again, you get that image in your mind of the gavel, but God chose an individual, anointed an individual, called them a judge, but they're a judge because they are supposed to understand what the law teaches, Israel's disobedience and breaking the law, and attempting to bring them back in alignment, because God says, if you follow me, if you keep my law, then I'm going to make sure that if your enemies come in one way, they're going to scatter 7 different ways. You'll be the head, not the tail. You know, these like promises, these blessings that come. And so a judge, like you said, Neil, is, I think, perfectly designed by God. The amazing thing about the judge to me, as you mentioned, is that God uses incredibly flawed people in order to do this work of judging.
Yeah. It's the spiritual it factor. He makes them the it factor by empowering them through his spirit. Yes. They are ordinary people. Yes. They have service in their lives, but the Spirit of God comes upon them, and now they have the it factor. Yeah. And people know. They recognize, just like when you see somebody say he or she, they have it. Well, have what? They have it. That's the way the judges were, supernaturally empowered by God to have that it factor.
There you go.
And Chris,
go ahead. Sorry.
Chris, just a little tweak in Judges. What seems like the impact of the judge, because you don't necessarily read that they start walking with the Lord, but when a judge does good, like Othniel, in chapter 3, verse 11, it says the land had rest for 40 years. And this idea that the land gets rest, and this is why when you read about Samson at the end, you know, he kills a bunch of people, but it doesn't say the land got rest.
The land plays a major role, because that's exactly why God is. That's the whole. Whenever in the law, the reason that God wanted to bless Israel was to keep them in the land and to give them rest. And Amen. So the moment that they disobey God, God's going, I got to get you out of here, or we've got to have a course correction spiritually. Neil, would you mind if I read? Because it's just a short section for Othniel. Can I read this and then you can comment on it?
Yes, you may.
All right. The Israelites, this is Judges chapter 3, starting in verse 7, says, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. They forgot the Lord their God and served the Baals and the Asherahs. The anger of the Lord burned against Israel, so that he sold them into the hands of the Cushan, the Rishathaim, king of Aram Naharim, to whom the Lord were subject for 8 years. To the Israelites were subject for 8 years. But when they cried out to the Lord, he raised up for them a deliverer, Othniel, son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother, who saved them. The Spirit of the Lord came on him, so that he became Israel's judge and went to war. The Lord gave the Cushan Rishathaim, king of Aram, into the hands of Othniel, who overpowered him, so the land had peace for 70 years under Othniel, son of Kenaz, until Othniel, son of Kenaz, died.
70 years?
40 years.
Thank
Did
you.
I say 70?
Thank you, Steve.
I said,
Yes.
There was a hush that came. Pastor Neil and I could smell I could smell the burning. Who's gonna say it? It wasn't 70 years. It was
Sorry.
40 years.
So the land
I don't
had
know what
peace.
book you're reading.
So the land had peace for 40 years until Othniel, son of
Look,
Kenaz,
it's nice
died.
of you to give them 30 more, but they only had 40.
All right, I'm sorry.
Pastor Neil, he was thinking, hey, I'm a guest on this show. I don't know if I ought to correct the guy or not. What book is he reading?
100%. All right, Neil, take it away. Sorry for butchering that for you.
No. So, hey, let's just go to verse 7 and make a comment here. Evil in the sight of the Lord, they forgot the Lord. Let's talk about that real quick. You know, it says in chapter 2, there arose a generation after Joshua and the next generation that did not know the Lord. And it looks like they kind of have spiritual amnesia. And I think what's important to say, you mentioned this earlier, Chris, Israel was in a covenant relationship with the Lord. To know someone is to be in an intimate covenant relationship. You know, it's when it says Adam knew Eve. So to say there arose a generation that did not know the Lord, it's a generation that they not only forgot, they rejected. Right? And I think about all the things I forget constantly. You know, forgetting somebody's name, my kids' names. I call my kids the wrong names all the time. Drives them crazy. Now I have a granddaughter, and I name all my other kids before I actually get to her name. She's 11. She wants to kill me, right? And it's frustrating for her, but think on another level. They forgot the Lord. And here's where the rejection comes in. They serve the Baals and the Asherah. Now, what are the Baals and the Asherahs, and why is that important, right? Any of you guys want to talk about that just for a moment?
Well, this is the crux of what you're talking about. The fact that in generations removed from Joshua now, we have an issue on our hands because they forgot God. And we actually have archaeological proof in Israel that the Israelites were worshiping false gods in the land. We have proof of it. And it's not just in the Bible that it's telling us this, but they were worshiping false gods. In fact, there are some that I was reading one particular scholar that was talking about the fact that Asherahs, there's a point where some scholars believe that they actually imported Yahweh, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, into an Asherah. So they were going, oh, that's Yahweh right there. Almost like the idea of the golden calf. Like, oh, that's the God who delivered us from Egypt. Just like that, you know, we're talking about generations here, but the Israelites forgot about God the moment they came out of Egypt, and God led them through. But that the Baals and the Asherahs are Canaanite gods of fertility and things of that nature, and produce, the idea that rain would come and thunderstorms and all these things that would produce life, and they forgot the God that actually provided life to them.
We invented assimilation. We perfected assimilation. This is an example of they were to be light from the land. We've talked about it, the bridge to 3 continents, and the people were to see how they respond to the living God. Instead, they said, we like the lights. We like the Las Vegas lights. We like the system. We not only like it, we're looking at what we have, and we're looking at what you have, and we want to embrace that. And I could speak as an assimilated Jewish person in America, second generation. My people in America love America. They're not rushing back to Israel. It's just like the days of Esther as well. Business is good compared to the problems in Israel. And while there are some people who go back to the land, and we thank God for them, most of us are staying here.
Think about American culture too. We want people to assimilate, we want them to.
We're
come
more
in.
than I'm telling. My father used to tell me stories of his parents who got here before World War I, who witnessed from afar family members dying in the Holocaust. When my dad and on my mother's side as well, their parents, with their accents, they had heavy European accents. I remember that. And what were they telling them? You're in America. You're in America. We're Jewish. We're proud of being Jewish. In America, you could be Jewish, but you are an American. And we need to embrace the responsibility and also embrace the opportunity that America affords us. And Jewish people in America are just like the ones that back all the way in Spain, the golden age of Spain, they assimilated then. Mm-hmm. The danger is, and we talk about it all the time, is Jewish people are always marked out by the Goyim. Mm-hmm. Always. Always, always. And we thank God for the Hukkabees of the world, evangelical Christians who love the Jewish people. But there's always going to be a grain of doubt. How long will this last? Because they will always turn on us. That's the way it is. And by the way, Judges tells us that.
Yeah, and that's in diaspora. Neil's teaching us about Jews in the land. They're in the land.
That's right.
Yeah.
We love to assimilate. Yes.
And Steve, I want to give you a word that I think would be a good word for Judges when we talk about assimilation, because in some ways in America, assimilation is a good thing, right?
Yes.
So here's the word I've been using. They are becoming Canaanized.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly it. Yes.
This is the Canaanization of Israel, when God said you're supposed to be set apart. And Chris, you said, they go to the Baals and the Ashereth, and Steve, you said this to get blessing. And here's the sad part about it is, God said, you're to come into the land. I'm putting you in the most strategic place in the world. These ancient trade routes where everybody's going to go by, they're going to come in contact with you, and you're not to go there to get blessing from the Canaanites and their gods. You're to come and be a blessing, to bring goodness. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's evil in the sight of the Lord. And guys, if you think about the Asherah, they're sacrificing children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What Israel must have been doing at this time to say they were worshiping those gods, it's painful. And let me just say this as another just bit of background. A lot of times we think we're too smart for that. We wouldn't do that. And you know what I say to people who think we're too smart for that? Who's the wisest person who ever lived outside of Jesus?
Solomon.
Mm-hmm. When he becomes king, he becomes Canaanized.
He does.
Yep.
And he sacrifices children. Mm-hmm. Or at least he funds it with the state funds.
Yeah. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
So none of us are so smart. Oh, I wouldn't do something that bad.
And it becomes a reality for Israel as they go generation to generation and they forget the Lord. And it's this, and that's what you're going to see as you move through Judges too, is that it moves from, you get that, I said 70 years, excuse me, everybody, 40 years. But think about how much time changes in 40 years. 40 years ago was the early 1980s. I was born in 1982. That world doesn't exist anymore. That, the way people think, the culture. I was even looking at some of the things that, thinking about some of the things that like politicians were talking about in the early 1980s. They weren't anything of what we're talking about today, of what's happening in schools and what's going on with families. These really deep ethical, moral issues were not the conversations that average Americans on either side of the political spectrum were having. They didn't have those conversations. In just 40 years, the conversation has completely changed. And so just imagine what 40 years can do after Othniel, and you forget that fast, you forget that quickly, and then you're moving into another judge, essentially. Sorry, Neil, yeah. I don't mean to move away from you.
Okay, so let me move us along here, because I know you guys will end up spending 3 weeks on this two verses. Okay, therefore, the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he sold them into the hand of Cushan-Rishathaim, king of Mesopotamia. Let me make two quick comments here. Somebody, when I told them what this cycle of Judges, Israel sins, God sells them, They cry out to the Lord. He provides a judge. They didn't like it when I said God sells them. And what we don't understand, this is the talk of masters and servants, right? That God was Israel's master. But remember, Yevareha Adonai Ve'ishme Reha, he wants to bless them, and to be under him is blessing. You know, when it says he sold them into the hand of Cushan Rishathaim, king of Mesopotamia, he's just selling them to the people that they're serving their gods.
Mm-hmm.
Cushan Rishathaim, Cushan of double wickedness.
Mm.
That's what that means. And here's the thing we know. If we choose to serve anyone or anything other than God himself, that God becomes a hard taskmaster. And we know that anyone with an addiction will tell you that, right? Anyone with addiction says, this is the thing that controls my life. This thing I'm coming to get comfort or blessing ultimately becomes the source of your pain.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's being played out here. Okay? Y'all want me to move on, or you guys want to make a comment?
No, go ahead.
Keep it going.
Okay, but when the people of Israel cried to the Lord raised up a deliverer from the people of Israel who saved them, Othniel, the son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother. The Spirit of the Lord is on him. He judges Israel. He goes to war. God gives him. And what's fascinating about this judge, y'all, in a world where we create social media stars, we create influencers, there's hardly anything said about him.
Yeah.
Yo, this guy's boring. He doesn't even deserve for us to preach on him. And it's interesting in a day where we talk about celebrity preachers. We love celebrity preachers and we hate celebrity preachers.
Mm-hmm.
But we keep making celebrities out of everything and heroes out of people who have done nothing. And God picks a judge, and this is absolutely one of the best judges, and you know almost nothing about him because the focus is on who? The Lord.
Mm-hmm.
The Lord is the one who has ultimately got to deliver. Now, Steve or Chris, you know, what we do know about this guy is he was younger brother, the son of Kenaz, which I think is kind of fascinating. We get that detail. Do y'all want to comment on that?
Well, I want to comment on just what you said before that. Chris, you have a philosophy with our Tikva team people, moments of ministry. And what Pastor Neil just emphasized was God using Othniel in a moment. Of history.
Yeah.
Of history. It's a moment. And ministry is like that, where this is a big event. The 8 years. They had to live 8 years under a bondage. And then God raised up a person, Othniel, to defeat them. And in the history of Israel, it's a short time. It's a moment. But God raised him up for that moment. And we use the same principle today. That's your philosophy with our Tikva team.
It's our Tikva team. Our interns is you don't have to report hours to me. You don't have to work 40 hours a week. I want to hear about the moment that God gave you in order to minister to somebody.
Othniel had a moment.
He had a big moment.
He had a big moment. He was here. And then he's not.
He's remembered for that moment.
He is remembered for that. We don't know anything. Pastor Neil, we don't know anything about him.
Yep.
Except this. That was his moment.
Yep. That's right. Neil, yes. I also want to say, too, when I read this and I hear it coming from you, you know, it's amazing how when you hear the word of God spoken, you know, sometimes you think differently when you hear somebody else reading it, too.
Especially if they say 70 instead of 40.
That's exactly right, when they butcher the text. What I hear, you know, especially when I'm coming into Judges and thinking about your introduction, is what grace that God has, that he delivers he chooses this one man for this one moment to deliver his people who don't deserve it. They weren't asking for it. They didn't ask for it. God just did it for them. And that to me is the greatest kindness of God that you could possibly ask for, that these people, that the Israelites in this moment don't deserve it all.
While we were yet sinners, Christ died for us.
Yes, exactly.
Grace, 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 grace.
That's
Free, 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 free.
That's right. 7 times he's got it. I love it.
And he's even got a sticker on his shirt. This guy, he's amazing.
Yes. Well, let's just talk about him just for 1 second, because I think this is so fascinating. Because, sometimes, and I've had this asked at our church, because one of the cool things that's happened in Northwest Bible Church is we love the nation of Israel. And also, because of what lots of people in our church are doing, get to share with Muslims all the time. We have Muslims who've come to know Jesus at our church. I will have Muslims at my house for Thanksgiving. And sometimes people say, well, doesn't God care about everybody? Well, it's very interesting. It says he was the son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother. We know from Numbers chapter 36 that Kenaz is from the line of Esau.
Interesting.
And you kind of got to dig a little, and you say, whoa, was maybe his mother was from the tribe of Judah, right? Because it says who's going to go first, tribe of Judah, and Caleb does this. This is Caleb's younger brother. So my best guess is his mom is from the tribe of Judah. His dad is somehow connected to Esau. And here we are. This is God. Grace, 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 the whole world. Because what was God wanting to do through Abraham and choosing a nation of Israel, putting them in that spot in the land? I want to bless you, and I want to bless the whole world. Mm-hmm. I'm for the whole world. And when we say, I love Israel, and I got my sticker, I'm actually saying, I love the whole world. And God takes this faithful man who's not even a perfect, purebred Jew, because this is what God wants to do. And when we see in the greater Savior Jesus, you look at his line.
Yep, same thing.
There's lots of people in there we think shouldn't be in there, because grace, 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 grace.
I'm always reminded of Exodus chapter 19, 6 and 7, when God chooses Israel. And when he chooses Israel, he says to them, the whole earth is mine, but I'm choosing you to be a kingdom of priests. That doesn't mean like what Neil is saying. It doesn't mean I'm choosing you over everybody else because you're amazing. He's saying I'm choosing you for a purpose because the whole earth is mine. Why does this moment happen with Othniel? It happens because God chose a people to bring blessing to the whole world. And you know what happened? They're falling off the tracks. And God's going to use this one man, this one moment to get them back on so that he can fulfill the promise of bringing blessing to all the families of the earth. I mean, it's just mind-blowing when you think it's only a few verses long.
Yeah. So let me give a quick little application thought in light of what Steve shared about this moment. Here's a guy. Nobody's posting about him on Instagram. He doesn't have, he's only got 7 social media followers. He feels like the,
just like us.
He feels like the Jew and Gentile podcast.
That's exactly right.
He's got Bupkis and and yet God uses him, and God is exalted. And so what we want to say to everybody, whether you have 1 follower or no followers or 1 billion followers, you know what? God is looking for people who want to bless the world, and they want him to receive the glory and honor. In other words, I'll close with this. It's okay to live a boring, faithful life in a world where we're just all want to be some influencer.
Yeah.
I like boring. I've always liked boring.
Hey, can I say one more thing, Neil? This isn't to top you, it's to add to what you're saying, is that the thing that makes Othniel just a little bit different from us today is that God chose Othniel and put the Spirit of God in him. And we live on the other side of what Jesus did. Everybody who's placed their faith in Jesus has the same Spirit that God gave to Othniel in them.
And sealed.
Yes.
That's right. It doesn't go away, because with Othniel, it could have just gone away. It could have been there for that moment and left. that was the way it was in the Old Testament. In the New Testament, though, in the new time, because of what Christ has done, the coming of the Holy Spirit, we have been empowered by God for the moments that he gives us. That is huge. So, Neil,
Amen.
We got 2 more weeks left with you. We're excited about it. We're going to go to the news. I know that you have a meeting in a few moments, so you stick around if you want to. If you got to leave, you got to leave. But we got some news to talk about. So you're coming back next week, right, Neil?
That's right. And I'm going to sign off you guys from a meeting. Thank you very much. Yavareha Adonai Be'yishmereha.
Hey, thank you very much, Pastor Neil. And blessings to you, my friend. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. All right, Steve. So that was great. It was great.
Fantastic.
We went to church today. That's what we did.
That's right. Well, he got to review his message.
I love that.
He probably loved that.
Well, you know what's funny is that you and I look. I'm not trying to sell us out here, but the thing I love about our ministry is that we get to go from church to church to church, and we get to work on our messages over and over. When you're a pastor, this is it. You're in it now, and you got one chance. Get in.
One shot.
One shot, and that's it. So
you file it, because if you leave that church, you got material for the next one.
That's right. We went to Charles Stanley's office at In Touch in Atlanta, and they had his file cabinet for all of his messages. The thing went a city block. There was so much material. So I'm with you 100%. Steve, we got some news for our listeners.
Which one do you want me to start off with?
I think you should start off with the one that we were talking about earlier.
Okay. In New York?
In New York, yes.
All right. Chris, I was perusing the New York Post, and I came across, and this was at about 4:30 in the morning when I came across it. And here's the headline. Grilled guinea pigs are this New York City restaurant's shocking specialty, and the head is the best part.
What does that even mean?
There's a restaurant, La Casa del Coy. La Casa del Coy, the House of Guinea Pig. $110, and they're going like hotcakes. This is a special Ecuadorian delicacy. It's hailed them as a very delicious feast. And Chris, they provided a picture.
Oh, they did.
A photo.
Oh, they even, if you go to the website, which is in the show notes by the link that we have there, not only is it a picture, but they have a video of how they make it.
Oh, I didn't see the video.
Oh,
it's better than chicken, better than rabbit, manager Lucio Barrera told the Post, even claiming that the head is the best part.
This paragraph makes me laugh. We talked about this earlier when we were packing Hanukkah boxes together.
That's right.
We'll talk more about that next week, our Hanukkah boxes. But it says this: at least that is the experience. The restaurant La Casa del Coy, literally the house of the guinea pig, a culinary go-to in Corona, Queens, that grills and serves the rodent koi whole, essentially every part but the squeak.
It's called the squeak. They say, give me one squeak.
That's what they say. Give me one squeak.
If they have a large party of 20 people, give me 3 or 4 squeaks.
The question is the guinea pig kosher or non-kosher?
Non-kosher. It's a rodent.
It's a bottom
dweller.
No
matter how you slice it or dice it, it's a rodent. And I gotta say, the skewers coming out of their mouth doesn't look too appetizing.
Well, that's what the video shows, is the skewers going into the mouth.
Vesmir.
Koi devotees have promoted farming them as more sustainable and profitable alternatives to cows and other traditional livestock because they require less space and fewer resources. Why is everyone trying to get rid of cows? Why?
I don't know.
I've never met a person that said, unless you're a vegan or you're vegetarian, I've never met a person that said, I hate cows. Everybody, I love hamburgers. I love meat. I like steaks. Why is everyone trying to get rid of the cow and replace it with guinea pigs and what are those little locusts that you can get that are you know what I'm talking about? Grasshoppers, all these crazy sustainable. We need to learn to make cows more sustainable. I don't want to lose my hamburger.
At Casa del Coy, the specimens are thawed, skewered lengthwise on jumbo rods before they're marinated in garlic and other spices, placed over a flame in an outdoor rotisserie. They're then rotated on the koi carousel, until crackling and bronze.
Ay, ay, ay. Well, we're not going to see a La Casa del Coy in Jerusalem anytime soon. Okay?
We're not taking our people on encounter to go to La Casa del Coy.
Yeah, we need to make sure that deli, the Cat's Deli, stays open because we're not going.
No rodents for us.
All right, Steve, you got another article that you found here. All these come from Steve, who's texting them the last couple days to me, and it's been hard to keep up with the news. I'm telling you, with Mike Huckabee information coming out, Elise Stefanik, all these things play into foreign policy, which I think we're going to see a huge shift in foreign policy. It's hard to keep up. So when I made this lineup, and Steve's been sending me things, things are changing quickly. That's why we wanted to dedicate time to what was going on with Mike Huckabee.
We want to be reminded, this headline, Jewish Columbia Barnard students fume that professors canceled classes over post-election stress, but not after October 7th. Very telling. Isn't that interesting?
It's actually very sad because they are right to be angry about this. So Jewish students are being spit on. They are being prevented from going to classes. There's protests about, the moment they might not even think anything about Israel, but they're Jewish, and that's enough for Palestinian protesters to target them. And instead of creating a safe, as they like to say on college campuses, a safe place, they let these protesters run. I mean, they were breaking into the buildings, Steve.
Horrible.
And now what happens? November 5th, Trump becomes president.
It's too stressful for them. Listen to this. This is an email to one professor's students. So I'm hoping people, all 7 of them, will pick up my tone. I hope you are all taking care. I recognize that processing the results of a national election can be heavy, and having space to breathe and go a bit slower is vital. That's words from Barnard professor Amelia Simone Herbert to her students.
The magic highball, our highball says to her, "You should be so lucky." Okay,
but there were at least other professors.
But this is the culture. Again, we know that their endowments are suffering right now. These Columbia, Harvard, UPenn, I believe that they're suffering because of what happened after October 7th on college campuses. But this, again, Steve, is this where you want to send your kids? Do I want to send my kids to a place where this is happening? The other day, Steve, we were driving down the street and my daughter says to me, my sons are making some noises in the back. And my daughter says, "Oh, please stop doing that. I'm being overstimulated."
Yep. I've heard that one.
I go, overstimulated? What does that mean? She goes, I'm just overstimulated. I said, life is overstimulating. This is what I'm saying to my daughter. She goes, don't get mad, Dad. I'm like, no, life is overstimulated. This podcast is overstimulating. This is the world, though, that they want to raise our kids. They want to keep them in diapers for their whole life.
Listen to this. A Columbia student wearing a Silver Star of David pendant who declined to give his name ripped the prestigious institution for what he called a double standard when it comes to Jewish students' safety. He said he disagreed with the university excusing students from class due to election-related stress. And then he said this, Chris, people are stressed because of homework. It's part of life. Get used to it.
That's what I'm saying.
He told the Post. So there you go. Take the nice approach.
Yeah.
And relax. Light your candles. Smell incense. And get over it.
Light incense. That's what the priests did. They lit incense. That maybe they were in a constant state of zen or something like that.
Why don't you take the last one?
All right, we got this interesting one. Far-right Dutch poll demands deportation of multicultural scum who attacked Israel soccer fans. Looks like a Jew hunt. This comes from the New York Post. A far-right Dutch poll is demanding the deportation of the anti-Semitic thugs who hunted down and attacked Israeli soccer fans after a match in Amsterdam. This actually comes from a quote that says, "Looks like a Jew hunt in the streets of Amsterdam. Arrest and deport the multicultural scum that attacked Maccabi Tel Aviv supporters in our streets. A shame that this can happen in the Netherlands. Totally unacceptable."
It was a pogrom. Chris.
It was.
It was a pogrom.
And that quote comes from Geert Wilders, who is in the parliament. I'm trying to remember. Is he the prime minister there? I can't remember.
No. But he was the one that his life was in danger.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. He's run for prime minister before, Geert Wilders. I don't know, but he's definitely more conservative.
Oh, yeah.
And he does not like what's going on in the Netherlands. As you can see, like you said, it was a pogrom. Israel had to send planes to Amsterdam to bring their people home.
Al volunteered and said, as long as it takes, anybody wants to come that has been affected by this, will fly you for free back home.
It says 5 Israelis were hospitalized when an anti-Israel crowd chased down Maccabi Tel Aviv fans in the streets of Amsterdam and attacked them after a soccer match against the Dutch team AFC Ajax. More than 60 people were arrested for taking part in a horrific attack, which Wilders and others have deemed a pogrom, just as you had mentioned. What is a pogrom, Steve, for our listeners?
A pogrom comes right out of the Eastern Europe when Russia and the Tsars attacked randomly Jewish communities, pillaging their places, villages, if you will, shtetls at that time. They attacked them. And then it was on horses, random violence against targeting Jewish people. And that's exactly what happened here.
I'm just looking. Geert Wilders is a member of the House of Representatives of the Netherlands. I know that he's run for prime minister before. And so the POL, I think, represents maybe his party or something of that nature. So anyway, the Netherlands are in a difficult situation, but there's encouraging things to the Netherlands too. I saw a video recently of a Christian concert in the Netherlands, and there were thousands. I think I might even read, I got to double check this, so don't quote me on it. 100,000 Christians came to worship the Lord in the Netherlands. I know there's a very big evangelical Christian population in the Netherlands. So hopefully there can be some change that's going on in a positive way.
That's great. That's great.
All right, Steve. I think we're all out of news.
We're all out of news.
But we do have one more spot for our listeners, our 7 listeners, Steve, who are out there. I know that there's some people who think there are 8, but we've got to keep them focused. There's really only 7 listeners.
That's right. And for our 7 listeners, as we heard Pastor Neil talk about the anger and wrath of God, where 8 years he sold them out. The Yiddish word is Mole-kas.
Mole-kas.
Molekas. Mole-kas.
What does that even mean?
Great anger.
Ay. That's what was going on with the judges.
We're Mole-kas of what went on in Amsterdam against the Jewish people.
100%. And in the New Testament, it actually says that God is angry with the world. His Mole-kas is angry with the world, but that's why he sent his son to ultimately bring peace and reconciliation between those who believe in Jesus and God, bringing peace between God and man, reconciliation, so there's no Mole-kas between you and God.
There's a lot of Mole-kas going on.
There's a lot of Mole-kas. All right, everybody, thanks so much for being a part of the Jew and Gentile podcast. Hey, I didn't get a chance to push this, but we're in a campaign right now. Our campaign is ChristmasIsJewish.org. You can go to ChristmasIsJewish.org and you can get a free digital download of Finding Messiah in Christmas, a 25-day devotional that's leading you and preparing your hearts for the coming of Jesus, Christmas Day, the coming of the Messiah, Finding Messiah in Christmas. Go to ChristmasIsJewish.org. Also, Steve's got his last class coming up. Go to FOIEquip.org. It's going to happen Thursday night. You can sign up and be a part of it. And then we've also got Hanukkah coming up. FOIEquip.org. Be there, be square, and hey, we'll see you next week.